Well, welcome to another episode of Ottawa Exposed. I'm David Krayden, the senior parliamentary columnist for the Western Standard. And it's a real pleasure to be back here. Well, we are in a real political firestorm here in Ottawa, largely because of healthcare, but we'll get to that later. But the real story that continues to brew today is Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's treatment of Alberta Premier Danielle Smith when all of the premiers got together to hear Trudeau's proposal on healthcare. I've got a lot to say about that, but I really want to talk about what happened on Tuesday when Justin Trudeau shook hands, sort of, with Danielle Smith. It was obvious Smith was hesitant to shake hands with Trudeau. This is her primary political opponent, her ideological adversary, and Smith was not comfortable being with Trudeau. A lot of women aren't comfortable with being with Trudeau, as we've seen over the years. And I think what he demonstrated with Danielle Smith is part of a trend that Trudeau is very contemptuous of female politicians, even though he calls himself this proto-feminist politician, the wave of things to come. He certainly has not demonstrated much of that in real life towards political women, including a Liberal MP in his own caucus who resigned years ago and said that Trudeau routinely yelled at her. And we remember the treatment of an NDP MP he elbowed. And he had his thumb on Danielle Smith's hand, and he was squeezing so hard that he actually left his thumb imprint on her hand. Now, that is absolutely disgusting kind of behavior. And here he is smiling and hamming it up for the cameras as usual. And by his actions, he's showing contempt that approaches abuse towards the Premier of Alberta. It's quite clear he is not comfortable with Danielle Smith in the way he talks and the way he deals with her. But he can't be honest about that, can he? He has to pretend. He's the actor to the end. He is the actor to the end. And that is what Justin Trudeau is all about. Danielle Smith, to her credit, did not feign happiness to be in the great one's presence. She looked very uncomfortable, and she was very uncomfortable. So what I said in my column, you know how a picture can say 1,000 words? Well, it not only shows Trudeau's contempt for Danielle Smith, it shows Trudeau's contempt for Alberta and how he likes to keep his thumb on Alberta. And he likes to squeeze Alberta for all it's worth. Now, Trudeau is going on and on about, he wants to find common ground with Alberta on energy issues. But of course, that's impossible when you have a person like Justin Trudeau who's committed to green energy to the point of dismantling the energy sector in Canada, the oil and gas industry. He wants to destroy the fossil fuel industry because he believes it's contributing to greenhouse gases, which are creating the climate change crisis, which is going to lead towards the end of the world in a decade. All of this is nonsense. The world is not going to end in 10 years. There is no climate change crisis to that point. And I think rational people understand that. If we go to a green energy program the way Justin Trudeau describes it in his so-called just transition, I call it the Justin transition, we are going to be a society living in the cold and dark, especially in this month of February, where it's very cold. Actually warmed up here in Ottawa, but last week, we were down to minus 30 with a wind chill of minus 40. Try doing that without fossil fuels. And we know we're not going to have electric cars overnight because it's virtually impossible to get enough of these minerals, including cobalt, that you need to power the battery. And we're using child labor. And I shouldn't say we, but China is using child labor to extract these minerals from the ground. This is absolutely appalling. But once again, people like Justin Trudeau just brush this off as if it's not a big deal. And of course, it's a very big deal. And it's something I think that Trudeau has got to come to terms with, but he won't. So what is Trudeau trying to do here? Why is, there's no common ground with Alberta, because if you look at Alberta's bottom line, it talks about things like liquid natural gas, exports to Asia. Even if we just look at that one example, Justin Trudeau refused to export our liquid natural gas to Germany. Pretty safe market, probably billions of dollars. But he said there was no business case for that. So I don't see a lot of common ground here. And frankly, neither does Justin Trudeau. So what is he doing? He is preparing for an election. And healthcare, which was at the background of this meeting with Danielle Smith, his first meeting with the Alberta Premier ever. It was to announce that he was going to put $46.2 billion of new money into the healthcare program. I say healthcare, and I think it's a misnomer because we have some of the worst healthcare in the world. And I'll be getting to that shortly. But Justin Trudeau is putting all of his eggs now in the healthcare basket in the hopes that this is going to resuscitate his prime ministership, his leadership, and the hopes of the Liberal Party to capture the next election and to regain power. I do not think that's highly likely. And why is he putting it all in the healthcare basket? Well, time after time, we see polls saying Canadians are really concerned about healthcare, that they're really concerned about their healthcare running out, or the fact that it's underfunded. So Trudeau figures he's got a real good political issue here, and he thinks he can run on it. Why does he think healthcare is so important? Because frankly, he doesn't have any more baskets to put his eggs in. He has spent so much time promoting and propagating woke policies that are dividing the country, that are creating divisiveness. He spent so much time on identity politics, including his recent appointment of Islamophobia czar. This is dividing Canada and angering Canadians. We want to be united. We don't want to talk about our differences. And that's all Trudeau wants to do because he thinks it's going to capture him votes. And healthcare, he thinks, is the saving value for him. I'll tell you why it's not going to work. Because you can keep pouring billions of dollars into our healthcare system, and it's not going to work because it's imploding. And it's basically a broken system. You know how broken it is? And I figured this out. I don't know how many other journalists or academics have actually sat down and said, okay, how much are we paying in taxes versus how much are Americans paying for their private health insurance? I think it's a valid question because the Fraser Institute, of course, every year puts out a report on healthcare. And it's absolutely shocking what we are paying in healthcare. And I mean, and the Fraser Institute outlines this very well. So if you are a family of four with a combined income of $156,086, which is not a lot of money, this is not wealthy with considering inflation and considering how much we do pay in taxes overall. You can expect to pay $15,847 alone for your health care for a family of four. Now that's based on 2022. It's going to be going higher as Trudeau puts more and more money into the healthcare system, and it continues to be dysfunctional. Now, what concerns me about this is that, okay, so if we're paying that much in taxes, which is real money, it's not something that's out there. This is money that's coming from your pocket. And if you're not paying it in taxes, you'll be paying it for something else worthwhile. So what is the average American household paying for profit healthcare? For a family of four, it's $1,437 a month. Now you do the arithmetic. We are paying marginally less in Canada for our healthcare system than they are in the United States. Now, I think this is absolutely shocking. And I don't know how many people have actually tried to figure this out. But once you get this in your head, you say, well, we're paying all of this, and yet we have massive wait times. Wait times. I mentioned the fact in my column that you remember Senator Bernie Sanders, the independent from Vermont, who perpetually runs as a Democrat for the presidential nomination. Why you can do that, I don't know, because he's an independent, yet pretends to be a Democrat when they're looking for a presidential candidate. Now, he ran on a far left platform in 2020 when he was seeking the presidential nomination that he eventually lost to Joe Biden. And that included something called Medicare for All. Now, it's basically Bernie's system that is modeled on Canada's. And he's always saying how much he admires Canadian healthcare. Except when Bernie had to have an emergency angioplasty in 2019, the American system was able to deal with him immediately. Now, at that time, he would have had to wait a maximum of 28 days for that emergency surgery. Guess what? You ain't got 28 days to have a valve or an artery or a vein to your heart unblocked. You're going to be dead very, very quickly. So if he had been in Canada, he would have been waiting for that operation and quite probably would have died before he got it. Now, today, that's a minimum of 28 days waiting for an angioplasty. And it's absolutely shocking what we are dealing with in Canada. Canada spends $300 billion and 13% of the GDP on healthcare. 25% of the federal budget goes to healthcare. I mean, that's more than national defense. That's more than anything, any other single expense. It's all going to healthcare. And yet we have these humongous wait times. And not only that, hundreds of thousands of Canadians are leaving the country every year to seek healthcare elsewhere. And guess where that elsewhere is? Usually the United States, because that's where they have to go to get emergency operations and surgery. They're not getting it in Canada because they have to wait too long. So it's fine to say we have a free system, and it's not free. As I said, we're paying for the system in taxes. But when that system doesn't work at all, what's the point of having Medicare? When we're not getting the health delivery we need, then yeah, we can say it's free, but it's not working either. And that is a Canadian tragedy. And it's something I think that we have got to come to terms with. And as Trudeau pours more and more money into this healthcare system, it's not going to solve the problem. It's just going to make it more expensive. And I think this is, and I say in this column, that Canada's healthcare system is a very expensive way to die because it's not delivering what it promises to. And why are we like this? Why are we continuing to say that the answer is to pour billions of dollars into this unworkable, dysfunctional healthcare system? Because we somehow see this as a Canadian totem. We see healthcare and Medicare, socialized medicine, as part of the Canadian fabric that can't be rent in any way. And even if it's not working, many Canadians view it that way. And it's time for a reality check, people. When a system isn't working, we need to find another one that does. And that's going to mean more private healthcare. There's no question about that. And I can't say a lot of good things about Ontario Premier Doug Ford. I think he's a faux conservative in many ways, but at least he's examining that option because, let's face it, he has to. The people are demanding it. So I wanted to also touch on the fact that Justin Trudeau knows that healthcare is the sacred cow in Canada. So he's going to point to Doug Ford and say, this is what opposition leader / Conservative Party Canada leader Pierre Poilievre is going to do to your healthcare. He's going to privatize it. He's going to make it for profit. And it's going to decimate you. Of course, he's not going to mention the fact that the so-called free system we have right now isn't working at all. And it's not free either. And your taxes are paying a large part of it. But he's going to pretend that we're going to have US-style healthcare in Canada. anytime the Liberals want to scare Canadians, they talk about U.S. style this or that, U.S. style legal system, U.S. style politics, U.S. style healthcare, U.S. style media, even though we're very little difference there now. But that is exactly where he's going to go with this, because he's a very desperate man, and he knows he doesn't really have anything else to point to in terms of accomplishments. And the last year he's been rocked by a lot of bad news. I really do believe that the Emergencies Act invocation is going to stick to him in a negative way. We haven't seen the end of that. We're still waiting for that report to come out, by the way. He has not yet received his advance copy. So that might mean it's February 8th, as I record this. I think he might not be getting his advance copy very early. It's coming out on February 20th, and I want everybody to be aware of that, because that's going to be a major story. Okay, I want to turn from healthcare to another story that we covered this week, and it was really outrageous in terms of the optics. And that was the Chinese spy balloon. I say that with some degree of authority. I mean, we know it was spying. Why would the Chinese be sending weather balloons over North America? Unless, of course, they were considering an imminent invasion. But I don't think they're doing it. They're certainly spying. And for people to suggest that the Chinese didn't get anything out of this weather balloon that they didn't already have with satellites, I don't know how they can say that without knowing what the spy balloon was capable of. So it's an assumption. And, the talk about Donald Trump let these things go by, absolute nonsense. The Director of National Intelligence in the United States refuted that, said it did not happen. But yet this was almost like it was a tragedy or a comedy of errors. This spy balloon comes down through Alaska. It goes all the way through Canada into Montana. And it drifts over Montana. And at the time, there's a news conference with the Pentagon spokesman. This is a Brigadier General Ryder. He comes on and he's at pains to explain why this balloon is still floating over the United States and why it got all the way across Montana without somebody shooting it down. Clearly, it's a violation of American airspace. They know it's a spy balloon, so what's it still doing up there? And he says, well, we didn't want to shoot it down because the debris might fall on school children. If you've been to Montana, you know it's got one of the lowest population densities in the United States. There's lots of open spaces. I mean, they call it Big Sky Country for a reason, because it's a huge state with very low population. So they had adequate opportunity to get the spy balloon down on Montana. But what did they do? They waited and waited and waited until it got off the eastern coast of South Carolina. Then they shot it down with an F-22 Sidewinder missile. Now talk about overkill. And in the process, of course, people are saying Biden's weak. Biden's weak. Yes, he is. Biden takes his time to deal with questions. Yes, he does. Should have acted sooner. Yes, he should. But now there's, of course, an escalation in the rhetoric against China. And the United States is already in enough trouble with Russia by arming Ukraine. Does it really want to arm Taiwan now to the point of provoking China? Do we need to worry about nuclear war on two fronts, in Russia and in China? I don't think so. So there's an irony of all this is that Biden could have handled this quickly and cheaply, but he did not. He allowed it to escalate into another foreign and defense policy problem. And that, of course, is having legs of its own as we watch the situation go from there. But as a former public affairs officer in our Air Force, I was saddened to see a United States Air Force Brigadier General hum and haw and try to justify Joe Biden's policies. It's always sad to see this. And it doesn't have to happen. But keep your eye on what's going on in Taiwan and in China and Joe Biden, who we just had the State of the Union last night. And of course, Biden's State of the Union is a different state than most people live in, because he's not living in the same America that other Americans live in. And that was reflected in his speech last night. Anyway, I don't know if they had him pumped up on pills or not, but he certainly, that was the most energetic I've seen him in 2 years. Now, before we take our leave here, I want to remind everybody, read the Western Standard on a daily basis. You can read my column there. I'm in there 5 days a week. My colleagues are writing some great things in the news and opinion. And guess what? We don't get a single cent of taxpayer money from the Trudeau government. And we're proud of that because we're part of the independent media that says we don't want to be subsidized. We don't want to be subsidized by the Trudeau government. And we're not. So I encourage you to subscribe today, www.westernstandard.net, so you can read all of our stories and find out what is happening in Canada and the world. But we are dedicated to the truth, and this is what Ottawa Exposed is going to deliver to you and continue to deliver to you every week, because I think we've got a great product here. And I think it's what Canadians want to see. So until next week, I want to thank you all for watching and listening and reading the Western Standard and reading my columns. And we've got more news coming at you next week at the same time. So for David Krayden, senior parliamentary columnist at the Western Standard, I want to say goodbye for now.
Canadian Shooting Sports Association. Without the CSSA, our gun rights would have been taken long ago. These guys are on the front lines helping to draft smart and intelligent firearms regulations and legislation in Canada, and more importantly, educating the public about how we keep guns out of the hands of the wrong people. To become a member, it's absolutely worth every penny. You can become a Western Standard member for just $10 a month or $99 a year for unlimited access